Hey everyone, want to thank you for taking a few minutes to come join us on the Huddle today. And today I've got a couple outside guests I think you'll be excited to hear from. I've got Mark Brown and Matt Maimone, who are the CEO and COO. I think I got that right, of Sazerac. And Sazerac is a company you'll like to hear about with some brands I'm sure that many of you have heard of. So first, guys, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, thanks. And you've had an interesting year like all companies, but before we get into the year, a quick overview of Sazerac would be great so that the viewers and listeners know what it is that the two of you do.
Yeah, we actually date back to the 14th century. So there is evidence of Sazerac in the National Archives in Paris, France. And we actually were an early day conglomerate. So the family, the Sazerac family, started out making pots for travelers. And in fact, they uncovered the ruins of the pottery in Angoulême about a year ago. And then they diversified into making bells and had a foundry. And eventually from there opened up a paper mill and also ended up in the brandy business, which is how we got into the alcohol business. And there's an interesting story that we were actually making cannons to help with the American War of Independence. So there are documented evidence of the company selling cannons to Ben Franklin and Captain Paul Jones during the War of Independence. And then we hopped across the Atlantic and became a bar in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And from the bar became the company. And today we would be the third largest producer of distilled spirits in the world. And we have brands, everything from Pappy Van Winkle, very expensive bourbon, hard to find, to Buffalo Trace, Fireball, Platinum 7X, and Southern Comfort. And all up, we've got about 450 brands.
It's quite a story to go from making pots in France 600 years ago to the revolution in New Orleans and now Louisville, Kentucky, of all places.
Yeah, we actually, we're spread out across the country. We've got plants in Virginia, California, Kentucky. We've got 3, Maryland, Maine, Indiana, New Hampshire, Tennessee. So we're not quite as spread out as you guys are, but we're in a big number of states these days with manufacturing facilities.
Well, it's exciting. And it's, as you just pointed out, these are products that are all made across the United States and in the United States. And Mark, I'm sure it's got to be a challenge to maintain such a variety of brands from one end of the spectrum. You've got Pappy Van Winkle, that's, as you said, hard to find, expensive. Love to talk about that. And then you've got everyday brands at far lower price points like Fireball or Southern Comfort, and keeping the brands separate so that the brands have personality must be a challenge. I'm sure the teams work really hard on keeping those brands in the space they occupy.
Yeah, we like you have had to learn to deal with SKU complexity and dealing with a large range of products. And actually, we think it's a competitive advantage because we've been doing it for so long. I think we've actually become halfway decent at managing a large selection of SKUs. And our competition is not particularly interested in large SKU. And so, in fact, it's really turned out to be a competitive advantage. But to your point, we've got a large marketing team that spends a lot of time making sure our brands stay in their lanes and compete appropriately in their niches.
Yeah, I'm sure there are so many temptations to try to find ways to sell more that affects the brand, or sell less to change the brand. But it sounds like you've got clear product and personality definitions for all of them.
Yeah, we've been able to put that together, which has been nice.
Yeah, very good. So this year, you got into a new product line as a result of the pandemic we've all faced. So I'd love for you to talk about how that came about, the decision, and how it's going.
It actually was a no-brainer for us. So first of all, we have history here. We have the history of actually helping the American War of Independence, but we have 3 more recent pieces. So in World War I, the Army commandeered the distillery in Kentucky, and we made ammunition by supplying butyl alcohol, which was used in the manufacture of gunpowder. So we were able to help out with World War I. You can also use what we make to make synthetic rubber tires. So we were also helping out by supplying the raw material for synthetic rubber tires. So that was recent history of us immediately helping out with a national need. The same exact thing happened in World War II. The Army came along, we were buying rotten potatoes, which the Department of Agriculture was supplying, and then we would convert that into butyl alcohol for help with the war effort. And then a little bit tongue-in-cheek, we actually helped out during Prohibition. We were one of 4 distilleries only in the United States licensed to make medicinal whiskey. And in some states during Prohibition, if you got sick, you would go to the doctor, and that doctor would prescribe 3 pints of whiskey a month. And then you would go down to the pharmacy, which is why the drugstores are in the alcohol vending business, and you would fill your prescription. So, and we were doing about 1 million pints a month during Prohibition. So we do like to think that we helped the nation get through that rather difficult 13-year period. So when COVID came along, it was very much in our culture to figure out, all right, how do we get to be helpful here? And we are one of the few companies in the country that had the manufacturing footprint to immediately start making hand sanitizer on an industrial scale. So while a lot of people helped out on a small scale, we had the ability to do it at scale. And it seemed like a very natural thing for us to immediately start doing.
And you know, you talk about those events as part of recent history, and World War I was over 100 years ago, but I guess in a 600-year-old organization, that seems recent. But Matt, I'm assuming that there weren't a lot of notes left for the team. You being the chief operator, there probably wasn't a guidebook on how you suddenly take a manufacturer that's doing one thing and tomorrow switch it over to something else. What was that like for you and your team?
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic example of teamwork. You know, we, as Mark said, we're very nimble and flexible in innovation, but usually we're talking about a few months. In the case of hand sanitizer, really from making the decision to executing the first bottles of hand sanitizer was about 9 days. You know, looking and saying, you know, given what was out there and the World Health Organization approved formula and where the FDA stood, was, you know, how can we get a safe, effective product out to people quickly? Because as you can imagine, and it's still the case, the need was great. So we really looked at, you know, and where our capabilities were and the resources that we had. And then as fate turned out, our ability, as Mark said, to scale was pretty rapid. So the product that we produced, the WHO formula, is a very liquid like hand sanitizer. So we were able to produce that and using some of our existing equipment, but at a rate, you know, that's very fast, you know, 200 to 300 bottles a minute. So able to really go from never having been in that business before to today, we've produced over 150 million ounces of hand sanitizer from a standing start just in a few months.
You went to West Point, is that right?
I did, yes.
You did. So what inspired you to take on the life of pursuing and being a cadet, and what got you there first? And by the way, thanks for doing that. It's so meaningful to all of us that get to do what we do every day because people like you decided to make that choice. What got you into in the academy and inspired you to be a soldier?
I was actually recruited to play football at Army, so I played inside linebacker. I had an interest outside of that, but that's what brought me to West Point. And then obviously, you know, that leads out into the opportunity to serve. And, you know, it's amazing the synergy between military operations, right, and then running operations in the business world. So it definitely offered some unique experiences for sure, and global experiences, right? So I think it kind of prepares you for a lot of these situations where, you know, you got to act well, just what we talked about today, right? Complex problem, need to solve it quickly, and get everybody together to do it. So no, it was definitely a great experience I've drawn on many times since.
The big lesson you talk about there with cadets and then officers, there's so much that is taught that I've seen in the civilian world with people who have led teams around me or for me or I've worked for, that just know how to dynamically think about when you lead from the front and when you lead from the back and when you support from the side. It's amazing to see how many people in the general economy started their career somewhere in the military and learned their leadership principles.
I think people sometimes have the wrong impression about the military. It is hierarchical.
People who are wanting to lead by being a servant. We've got core principles like respecting others, striving to be excellent, serving customers, and then operating with integrity, which are all just a click down, in my view, of being a great servant leader. Because what we do isn't as important as what we can inspire or help people around us be able to accomplish. So our role in our company is as effective as a leader when the people around us are doing better because we're here, not because of something that we did as individuals.
Matt is being very modest, but I came to the United States in 1980, so 40 years ago. And one of the things I've come to love about this country is its energy and its can-do attitude. And it was absolutely on display during this. We had a workforce that was scared. They were scared about coming to work. There was a lot of uncertainty around COVID. What did it mean? Was it safe to be at work? How were we going to catch this or not catch this? But all of that was set aside, and everybody rolled up their sleeves and said, all right, this is important. How are we going to get
in the journey of the company. Now, I guess part of this you got to recognize though is Matt. Now your supervisor knows how quickly you can get things done. So I think you probably set the tone for how quickly new innovation, speed, and products can come to market. Or are you thinking about that for next year's plan?
That's quite funny because we have a lot of NBD, new business development activity in the pipeline, and it typically takes 4 to 6 months. But everybody's kind of looked at this and said, well, maybe we have a new operating model. Of course, the very next thing that someone said is, well, we need about another 50 or 60 people. We just launched actually a kosher whiskey. That project was 10 years in the making.
When I was younger and new in my career, I was always amazed by the lead times that some products take to plan and develop and put to market and communicate to consumers. Because as a consumer, you just walk in and get so used to something just being on the shelf, or you get on a web page and there it is and it just shows up.
I was at the distillery yesterday staring into a fermenting vat that is going to become Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old, and that whiskey will go on sale in 2043. And next month, we will be doing the distillation forecast for 2044 and 2045. So if anyone listening, anyone watching this has an idea of how much we should make for 2045, be sure to let me know.
Well, as a retailer who very rarely sees that product for sale and would always be happy to sell more, whatever you forecasted, you should do more. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Write about for the brand, that stuff. Well, guys, you've done a great job with your brands. You've done a great job this year. I know you're proud of your team. I'm sure they're proud of what they do every day, and a lot of hard work goes into brands like the brands that you have. I just want to say thanks for your service as a supplier to Walmart, and also your service as a supplier who could be nimble enough to meet the demand of what people really needed this year. Make such a big pivot. It's an inspiring story. So thanks for doing that, and also just thanks for taking the time with us. Anything you want to say in closing?
No, you're most welcome. And I do think it's been, for us, a very good project for teamwork, because we've had everything from food scientists being key to this to associates on the bottling line having to get it done. So it was one of those projects that was a real opportunity to bring the workforce together as one team. And anytime you have an opportunity like that, it's wonderful to see it executed.
I think that what draws people to Sazerac is the ability or the opportunity to make an impact. And I think, and certainly in this time and during the pandemic, our entire team was very motivated to be able to make a positive impact. And whether that was in their local communities or otherwise, through donations and through hand sanitizer. And so it was just a fantastic story all the way around.
Thanks to both of you. And when this is all over, look forward to meeting in person, and we'll just talk about selling more product, and hopefully things will be simpler then. But in the meantime, what you're doing is making a big difference. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much. It's been nice to be a part of it.
Yep, thank you.